Welcome to our webinar series, A Business Leader's Guide to IT. In 2020, we had the pleasure of helping a lot of small and medium-sized businesses strategically with their technology portfolio. And in this webinar series, we've distilled the best bits. In part one, we look at business continuity planning and disaster recovery from an IT perspective. If you're a non-technical business leader who wants to understand how to transform IT from a cost center to a strategic lever that can enable your business, then this is the webinar series for you. In part one of the series, we'll hear from Broden Hurst of Clarity Technology Group answering the question, your office burns down, what next? Now, this is not just an analogy, as an effective disaster recovery plan takes into account forces of nature such as fire or flood, in addition to cyber events such as ransomware attacks on your business. So Broden, when the office does burn down, what do you do next from an IT perspective?
Yeah, so I guess the place to start with this question is more that if you're asking this question of yourself whilst you're looking at the flames engulfing your office, it's really too late. You need to be thinking about these sort of things basically now before you can even smell any smoke. So the best way to think of these kinds of things is you really need a business continuity plan. It's not just a disaster recovery effort, but it can also be a staff enablement piece surrounding how do I get my staff able to work remotely from anywhere in the world, and how do we make sure that one-off system failures of the large varying degree that they can come in, making sure those things have as minimal sort of impact as possible, and having a plan in place so that when these things do happen on day one, your business is up and running and profitable just as it was before.
Yeah, and we've obviously seen that in 2021. Within Clarity itself, we had to mobilize a lot of customers and their staff to be able to work remotely when the lockdowns and social distancing rolled through. So as you say, this is a really effective tool, not just in disaster recovery to recover if your business was hacked or there was some other disaster, but to enable the business as a strategic piece. And a lot of our managed IT services agreements with our clients always start with this question. We want to understand your starting point. How do you work and customize a disaster recovery plan for your business? So Broden, how does your team, the technical team at Clarity, typically go about finding a fit for purpose business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan?
Yeah, so as a non-tech business owner or business leader, this plan that we're talking about how to recover from large scale events, it can be as comprehensive or as skin deep as you want it to be. But the important things, the important thing is that you're asking certain important questions ahead of time before the realities have even struck you. So when we get down and we get down in the weeds and we meet one of our managed services clients, the first phase of developing this sort of strategy is around discovery. So we're trying to find out what systems your staff use and what systems they really critically need in order to perform their job function. And as an offshoot of that, where are those systems located? Are they on a server sitting inside your office? Are they a part of some sort of cloud offering, be it a platform as a service or infrastructure as a service sort of solutions? And then asking the question that naturally comes off of that, which is, are they backed up? Where are they backed up? What kind of backup is in place? And is that whole config, is that all immune to, or at least resilient to damage caused by a natural event or a cyber attack, for example? And then the second part to that is not only just the systems, but the actual data. So even if you think of something as low key as a company share drive, most companies have a share drive where all staff have access to it and they can drag and drop files as required to share amongst themselves. So the question is, where is that? Is it on-prem, or is it in your office, or is it in OneDrive, or some sort of cloud offering? And how often is that backed up? In the event of a disaster, how long will it take to get those backups into a functioning state for your staff to then have access to? How much data loss is there a potential to be? You know, if an event happens Friday afternoon, are you going to lose everything from that day, from that week, from that month, which, you know, is all a consequence of how often you do backup? And are the backups that are being taken, are they ever tested? How are you going through? How are you or your IT company going through the process of confirming that those backups are good and working? I can tell you one of the worst things as a backup engineer is to try and recover from an event only to discover that your backup is no good. So that's another really important question there.
Yeah, and that's something that we have seen a lot. Something that we do in all of our engagements includes a complimentary IT health check, and part of that is reviewing these disaster recovery plans, and particularly the backup, because all too often we'll come into a business and we'll see that they're pretty comfortable. Yeah, we've got our backup solution, we've got these hard drives that we rotate, or we've got this cloud backup. But when we dig a little bit deeper and review that, we've often found that backups haven't been run in for 2 or 3 months because no one is proactively managing and checking that data. So as you say, oftentimes businesses won't realize that their data backups aren't working or they aren't fit for purpose until they need them, and it's obviously too late.
That's right. So there's also, so once we sort of have the answers to those questions, what we usually ask our clients to do is, you know, you take the answers of what is currently in place, and then we weigh them up against, okay, well, what are your expectations around what you want? And more often than not, those two things are quite far apart when you get down into the reality of what it's going to look like on day one after a disaster. And as a non-tech business owner, this is not going to be something that consumes your days and nights like it does with us. So when we engage, it's very much geared around, okay, what have you got? What would you like? And then how do we get you to a point where you're happy with what happens in the event of a disaster?
Yeah, and on that topic of backups, one of the key parts as a takeaway for yourself as an operations manager in your business, or as the CEO or managing director in your small to medium-sized business, is go away and ask your IT company or your IT manager, if you have one on staff, what backup method are you using? Because the best practice in the industry is the 3-2-1 method. So Broden, did you want to give us a quick rundown of what the 3-2-1 method actually is and why it's so important?
Yeah, so the 3-2-1 method it's not complicated or anything like that. The rough idea is that in your backup solution, or well, in your environment, actually, you need 3 copies of your data across 2 different kinds of backup medium, whether that be different hard drives or 2 different servers, something like that, or in the cloud. And then one of those copies has to be offsite. So this is a rough sort of way to look at backup and to frame it in, okay, what's the best way to do this to ensure that, you know, in the event of a disaster, we've got a good copy of data that we can use and we can reference. Yeah,
that's great. So now that we've understood what an effective disaster recovery plan looks like, the value is always in execution. So what are the key parts of a standard response to a major incident like a ransomware attack or a major hardware failure due to fire or any other incident? What does your team actually do? What should the business do when they realize something's wrong, and how do we help out with that?
Yeah, so I would say that the key operational piece from our point of view is around communications and response. So as part of our DR plans that we share with our clients and that we get in place for our clients, communication piece is really key, and that comes as a result of sitting down and saying, okay, who does what? So you as a business owner really need to know who your providers are, and by that I mean who's your phone system provider and who are the key technology support sort of reference points that within those businesses that you can call and immediately escalate large-scale issues. And alternatively, whilst we're on the subject of something like phones, do you have providers in each one of these spots that we're talking about? Do you have providers who are willing to bring you solutions that mitigate things like this, like decentralized phone systems and stuff like that. You need to know who your internet provider is, for example, and you need to know exactly what your SLAs are on your contract for your connection. These are all just sort of entry-level things that need to be written down somewhere and kept up to date. You would be surprised how many businesses that we do engage with that don't have an up-to-date contact list or register for each one of their technology providers. You need to know who your IT company is and what your SLAs are on your IT managed services contracts for large-scale and critical tier 1 events, and what the realities are that come off the back of whether SLAs are met or whether they're not. So back to your question around the biggest, what I would say is the biggest advantage that our responses to these events give to business owners is, pardon the pun, clarity on what happens in each one of these events. So that communication piece involves, can involve us informing staff members of what has happened, how it happened, the steps that we're going to take on their behalf in order to clean the environment or mitigate whatever disaster has beset them, what the next steps are in terms of where their data will be once the DR plan is actioned, how they are going to access their data. Sometimes it can be the case that because of the nature of whatever the event was, the way that they access the restored data has changed. So there's steps in there for us to communicate with them around how they begin operating on day one after the building has been engulfed by flames. And it's really around having a communication plan around who tells what. And the biggest advantage that I would say we give is that we give clarity to the business owner around, okay, this is what happened, this is what they're doing to fix it, this is how long I'm going to be down or out of action for until those steps are met, and this is what the reality of working in a DR environment, or the failed over, so to speak, environment, this is what it's going to look like for my staff members. Probably the final thing that really sort of we get a lot of value out of is, a lot of the time we'll sit down and we'll nail, when we're nailing out who does what, a key internal person is nominated as, okay, for example, my operations manager, they're the person who knows this DR plan, and they're the ones who are going to be point on this, interacting with our IT company. And yeah, we just get and they'll have a second nominated as well, so that if they're ever off sick and there's an event has happened, we've got a very clear chain of command or communication structure around letting them know how long to wait for, what it's going to be like once the wait is over and things are restored, and who is doing which piece. So yeah, the clarity and just sort of ease of communication is what I would say is the biggest advantage to our DR plans and our major incident responses.
Yeah, that's perfect. And one thing that we really focus on here is again, fit for purpose backup solutions. So consider two businesses. One has undertaken a proactive disaster recovery planning process, and they know what their business continuity plan is. And one that has kind of done some stuff in the past, but hasn't really formalized it. These two businesses will have a very different experience when a hacker gets into the system because a staff member has accidentally downloaded a malicious email attachment. They've got a virus into the systems. A ransomware attack has gone through the network. Business A that's done the planning and has a disaster recovery plan in place, their downtime and data loss is very, very insignificant in comparison to business B, who has not done the planning. With business A, you can often restore from cloud backup to the site. You can give them their data on OneDrive, as Broden touched on. For business B that hasn't done it, they could potentially lose months or years worth of data, need to redeploy systems. They could be down for weeks on end, let alone the lost time and productivity to that and missed business while that process goes on. What value do you place on that data? So a backup and disaster recovery plan is really a great insurance policy there.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to frame this in sort of the context of the current world environment, so to speak, if we if your business exists in a location that goes into lockdown, part of a disaster recovery and business continuity plan can simply be, okay, how are my staff going to work from home tomorrow when they're not allowed to leave their front door? And that, honestly, it can be as easy as, well, they'll just use their home computers and they'll connect to various systems, job done. And if that is the case, that's fine. But these decisions and sort of the ins and outs of how this will actually work on day one really needs to be a conversation that's had now before anything happens, and is really, a conversation best had with a technology partner that you've sided with, rather than just sort of an IT support company, is what I would say.
Yeah, that strategic partner that can sit with you and understand those strategic levers for your business.
That's right.
So the key takeaways from this part one of our series: number one, review your current disaster recovery and business continuity plans. Do they exist at all? And are they fit for purpose? Ask your current IT provider or your internal IT manager, if you have an IT person on staff, ask them the question, what would happen if our office burnt down tonight? What is the planned IT response? And lastly, ensure your business data is backed up according to that 3-2-1 approach that Broden mentioned. If you have any questions about disaster recovery or business continuity planning, even how this can be used as a staff enablement tool, as we discussed, to have staff working in the cloud from home remotely, not just as a backup solution, then reach out. Our team are always happy to review your current systems and provide guidance and advice. And you should join us next time as well, because this dovetails quite nicely with part two, where we explore the question, is your business a high value target for hackers? If you wanted to get in touch with us at Clarity Technology Group, you can reach us via our website, www.findclarity.com.au. Thanks, Broden, and we'll do this again for part two in a week or so.
Great. Thanks, Drew.